Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Walk, Talk, and Rock podcast show episode. And in today's video, we'll be talking about that's right, the upcoming and new Star Wars RTS game. So, I'm pretty sure EA hasn't really made this kind of genre, RTS, real time strategy, especially in a kind of scale that requires a lot of slow gameplay. So we'll be talking about that and its surrounding genre and in the industry as well. So for this topic, like usual, the 5 sections, we'll be going over what is Star Wars Zero Company and why you should play it. RTS is not a genre that's for everybody, so take that with a grain of salt. We'll also be going over why the XCOM style tactics, if it is kind of based on XCOM, even though XCOM isn't the first RTS games, we had like Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy Tactics, and all that. That really defined the genre moving forward. And then the next section will be Star Wars strategy history, how they could incorporate, because there's a lot of diplomacy in the Star Wars series itself. And what makes strategies or tactic games fun? Maybe you want to give it a try. And lastly, the prediction for Star Wars Zero Company. Will it make a tactical comeback for the series itself? And fans alike, you know, can Electronic Arts do it? Will they be able to bring one of the most, I don't know, I guess it's kind of boring, because tactic games tend to be boring, in my opinion, because there's always only a few ways to win a match. Okay, like seriously, it could vary differently, but in games like StarCraft, it more matters on player input, and here as well. But for Star Wars' case, it's a single player game, so there's no PvP. All right, so let's get started. All right, Star Wars Zero Company is an upcoming single player turn-based tactics game from developers Bit Reactor, and it's going to also release on basically all platforms, so you can look forward to that. You can pre-order on Steam if you're really excited about the game. If you have a decent computer with at least RTX 2060, you'll be able to play the game just fine. And in here, you're going to follow. It's basically on the Clone Wars era, so there's going to be a lot of diplomacy and politics, where we have Hawks, one of the main characters and a former Republic officer. Just reading off of this, is a professional that gets called by the Zero Company, and I'm guessing this is where you will be like recruiting people to your faction or team or whatever, and you basically have to follow the story of being in the shadows. So I'm guessing the Zero Company is more like a mercenary group that where you'll be able to choose sides from like either the Republic or the Empire or the Federation. Like, I forgot if that was in there. So yeah, it's basically a Star Wars fantasy game. Not really much action, but a feeling of how you can control your own troops and lead them into victory. However, it is not a grand strategy RTS. It's more of a XCOM style. So, as I said, it's a single player game, and since it's more focused on the singular player style, and you're more focused on individual characters in the combat. I would say it's basically Fire Emblem XCOM, but with Star Wars assets. So if you think that's a game that you'll enjoy, definitely pick it up. But don't be surprised if it becomes a bit repetitive, because most strategy games that don't implement like the grand strategy of like 10x or whatever tend to get a little boring, in my opinion. And the only reason why you continue playing the game is because you're either invested into the story and the characters, or yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. Other than that, the gameplays for most strategy games is pretty mid. So obviously in this game, since it's going to be based on Star Wars, you'll probably have skills related to Star Wars and all that. And I mean, it won't really be different to XCOM because XCOM is also a sci-fi setting. So I guess you could try XCOM first while you wait for Star Wars Zero Company. So once again, from the developer, they say that, you know, Bit Reactor is actually a fairly decent studio at making strategy games, and I guess Electronic Arts chose them to help turn their dream into a reality. But the only thing I question is, like, I don't think anybody really asked for a Star Wars RTS game. You know, I'm more of a, can we get a brand new Star Wars Battlefront that's actually good? I mean, they had a recent one and stuff, but I don't really like how they handled the mechanics in that one versus like the original Star Wars Battlefront 2. And with modern features, there's plenty of other games they could have taken inspiration from to make it better, in my opinion. This one just feels like a pay-to-win slop bullshit that doesn't really involve that much. It probably involves skill, but not to the level I would imagine. So in this game, you know, Zero Company, you are not a Jedi, and you are not a clone. You are literally just building a squad across the galaxy. So I guess it would be cool if you're able to recruit NPCs from each political faction, and you could just form out your team of NPCs or characters that you like. Hopefully there's some sort of base building. You know, maybe you have your own ship, maybe you manage your crew, or maybe you manage a little moon base or some sort of base headquarters. That'll be cool. Kind of like I forgot what strategy game it was. I guess it's kind of like a little bit like XCOM or that Fallout game that had base building. It's not 76, it's something else. Okay. So yeah, there's not really much. We just have to look forward or see what else they'll add into the game. But from what I can see, it looks like your typical sci-fi RTS, just with Star Wars assets. Hopefully the gameplay is going to be fun, because other than having Star Wars assets, nothing's going to save an RTS game that's already a mid-genre into being fun. They're not incorporating any of the Star Wars amazing features. Maybe like, see, that's the thing, there's just like photon strikes, laser beams. Those are all sci-fi themes. And I think the only defining factor that Star Wars really has in the franchise is literally just the lightsaber, guys and girls. Like, I feel like if you take the Star Wars name away from the franchise, it's literally just a bland sci-fi fantasy. And then, you know, the Force and all that, it's just basically magic. I mean, if you were not to think about it that way. Like, telekinesis and all that shit is not a unique thing to sci-fi and magic. Just the lightsabers, honestly. So this is why I feel like the XCOM style tactics is gonna really work well with Star Wars Zero Company. You'll probably have your squad-based missions. You deploy different members from your crew to tackle on the quests that they throw at you. Maybe there'll be restrictions, maybe there'll be some conditions, who knows. But for the general idea, if it's gonna follow like XCOM, you basically have characters with different varying movesets, skills, and obviously stats. Since it's turn-based, you might have to like cover, have teams that flank, and maybe you have a few healing characters or whatever. Maybe they'll have dynamic events like overwatches or standing NPC guards that will shoot you when you're moving. Well, that's the thing. You know, Valkyria Chronicles, another famous single-player RTS game, published by Sega, really defined the genre as well. So they really have pretty much a lot of competition in order to justify making this Star Wars Zero Company RTS game. I mean, personally, in my opinion, I don't really think the game is gonna sell that much. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some billionaire is gonna buy 100 copies, a million copies of the game. You know, most of the time, I feel like most of these games are just made at the request of rich people that, you know, like the game. But I digress. It might be a fun experience. So in accordance to that, as we continue on, maybe there's a hardcore mode like Darkest Dungeon. You know, you can have permadeath or whatever, and maybe it'll have some basic base management, like I mentioned, and upgrades, which is very typical for any type of these games. But what would really be so terrible is if EA made all the really good upgrades. You know what they say? The DLC, y'all. I would be so... Like, I'm literally just not gonna even pay attention to that game. And like, if they do add DLC or paid content to make your character stronger or whatever, since it is a single player game, which would make no sense, then I would just turn the other way and don't even bother with Star Wars Zero Company. You could just download XCOM, play XCOM. XCOM is so freaking good. It's literally one of the best in its genre, and there's a hefty amount of mods you could just download and have a really fun time with if you're really looking for that squad-based RTS game, other than Fire Emblem and other games I mentioned. So why Star Wars will fit this for me? Obviously, it's basically just a sci-fi game setting, so it's obviously gonna fit different amounts of explosives and all that. I'm not sure if it's gonna have a unique story, but it may follow, you know, the epitaph or the top of the Clone Wars, so it'll be from like a different perspective. So maybe we'll get to see two perspectives of the Clone Wars. You know, the Imperial and Republican, and you just get to fly around space and pick your battles to your pleasing, maybe. Let me look at this store page real quick. In here, you know, it says you can strategize and adapt your base for operations. Kind of has a Hell Divers 2 kind of command center going on. And then you engage in tactical warfare. And then you can make bonds with your squad. So I don't know if the main core squad or just players you will naturally get, or you can choose people that you want. So here, it says here you can customize their appearance and customize their loadout and weapons, which looks great. But you're probably going to be limited to just Star Wars assets, so that's okay. So why is this different from every other Star Wars game? Well, obviously because it's tactical. And in XCOM, the soldier is not just a unit. The soldier becomes a member of you because of like all your experiences through the campaign or quests that you may inherently just form with your unit. You know, you have that feeling too, like when you play an RTS game and it has a campaign, right? Let's say like Fire Emblem, and you're playing in a hardcore mode where if the unit dies, they're dead forever. Maybe you have those lucky moments where you lucked out and they got a crit or something, and they just defeated the last boss of a mission, and then you're like, oh man, you're pouring all your resources into that character for sentimental value or because of the meta. So hopefully they have some sort of thing like that in the game, where it still has that roguelike form of grinding, which will obviously make the game more rewarding. So it's gonna reward you for going on harder quests and missions and fighting stronger enemies, and you'll be able to formulate your own strategy, and hopefully it'll be unique. And maybe since it's a single player game, there'll be some cheese tactics, you know, like just spamming a healer and having one main tank like attract all the enemies or whatever. It's usually that's how it comes down to for most of these unit-based strategy, real-time strategy. I mean, turn-based strategy games. So, what are the other games? Like I said, XCOM 2, Fire Emblem, even one of the older games like Marvel's Midnight Suns, Warhammer 40k, Chaos Gate Road Trader, oh, Gear Tactics, Hostline. Oh my bad, not Hostline. I meant Valkyria Chronicles. And I guess like any other turn-based games, maybe Combat Arms could fit in this category. Definitely disgae series fits in this category, which I have no idea what's going on with that franchise. What other good ones? I guess Total War series. You know, if you like Total War, but that's more of a grand strategy game. Those games can definitely hit the niche. And now where Star Wars Zero Company comes in, right? Zero Company is not just part of the bigger question of why RTS. Star Wars doesn't even have any major strategy games, so I'm guessing they just want to have a strategy game for the sake of it with the Star Wars franchise. So Star Wars strategy games make sense because the franchise is literally about wars, factions, armies, fleets, and economies, and impossible campaigns. You know, imagine the Zero Company that you're leading is contracted to infiltrate, I don't know, the Empire, and you have to subjugate one of the ships because they have some NPC that you can befriend to help you like build resources from an unknown planet that you need. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities here, and I think being a neutral faction and not a faction that's part of the main factions, you know, like being a Jedi or whatever, works well. So then there's just going to be more content for the player to experience both sides of the Star Wars universe in a strategy perspective. So I do hope there's going to be base building, factions, resource gathering of some type. Maybe instead of armies, you'll have platoon squad base assignment. So maybe there will be some portions where you can send out a squad to do some quests. Kind of like how do I explain this part? Like an auto quest, auto explorer feature, and then just bring back materials or whatever that you need to repair your equipment or upgrade your gear or whatever, or upgrade the base. Of course, they'll have hopefully galactic conquests, so maybe you can travel across the universe, and I'm not even sure if it's gonna have that kind of conquest, kind of like Bannerlord or Mountain Blade, where you're able to raise your own army, right, and conquer different landmarks from different factions like castles and whatnot. So hopefully the game will have that. I'm not even sure, but I don't think it'll have that since it's not a grand strategy game like a 10x RTS. So they'll definitely maybe have space battles, maybe definitely have battles like ground battles with your units, of course. The Empire versus the Republic, maybe fleet movement, maybe planet control. And honestly, if you're just not interested in Star Wars, it might not even be the game for you, since I feel like Electronic Arts, as everybody knows, hasn't really been making fun games. Like right now, these companies that make video games, all the original developers are gone, and the only thing left is just business people that only care about money and not about making a fun game. So that's the kind of state of why a lot of recent titles and games haven't been really fun anymore, because they're more focused on profits. And I don't know, I don't even know what's the point, honestly, of why these people are not drawn into making good games, but are instead drawn to making big numbers, because every currency is literally an infinite resource. They can just make that shit every single day. But I guess that's how we are right now, right? No one's focused on actually making a fun game. So this game might actually kind of be half-ass in that regards to a true squadron RTS game. Not to say that the developer might not do a good job, but just because of, expectations of whatever the business people literally just care about is money and sales and in that nature, right? So as we continue on, hopefully the game will have those core mechanics and gameplay. And I saw that you could build actually your own identity in the squad, which is cool. Like you can have RDD2 skin and the robots and all that, and it looks really nice. And yeah, just like cool if you like Star Wars. Honestly, if you don't like Star Wars, it won't even be cool, right? And in particular, for this to even work out with this, I feel like Zero Company is going to be taking the direction of a personal approach when it comes to the storytelling. So I don't think the player will have really much to lead the story. You're just going to experience it and be able to see the characters you bring along with you in your adventures. So maybe one question for you guys is, what is your favorite squadron-based RTS game? Just name any game below. So to understand why this genre still matters, I'm going to talk about what make tactics and strategies an addictive genre in the first place. Well, as of now, I don't think it's very addictive or fun, because a lot of people don't even have the attention span to last more than a minute or reading text on the screen, right? Everybody has that TikTok brain of instant gratification and instant dopamine, so that kind of sucks. So I really don't think, and I really don't know why Electronic Arts decided to make this Star Wars RTS based game, because I feel like it won't even make, I feel like it's not even gonna be that popular, to be honest. But I like strategy games and I will probably play it. That's why I'm making this video about it. So in my opinion, what makes strategy games unique is, like I said, the feeling of leading a team into victory. And I just love the part of where I have to like strategize and use all the features like management, like unit management, inventory management, and all that. I love that personally, because it really feels satisfying when your management skills pay off in the end and you're able to clear the stage or the next level and just progress through the campaign or quest with the units you've chosen. Nothing feels good. It's like you're a company and you're also the hiring manager, and you select the people that you want in your team, and it feels great when your team efforts and your leadership skills pay off, because wow, you really made a team that works for you and succeeds. I think that's the main reason why a lot of tactic games are popular in the first place. They like to make their own teams and are happy when they succeed. And as in the case for XCOM literally has everything, guys and girls. Tactical battles, base progression, like everything. Crafting, diplomacy, politics, trading, upgrades, research, and a lot of dynamic events in there, like invasions and defending. I really hope Star Wars has some sort of thing to, like, hopefully the map isn't just a bland overview of just like pick this area, pick this area, pick this area. Maybe there's also dynamic events and diplomacy actions happening throughout the map, and you get to decide if you want to defend a base or attack a base or like infiltrate a base or whatever. And that'll be cool because it literally fits the Star Wars franchise. And not many few RTS games do this because it's a very hard feature to implement. You know, one of the hardest things about making a squad-based RTS game with these kind of features of like a grand strategy game is diplomacy and AI politics. Most of it is hard-coded, but hopefully this doesn't have to be the case for Star Wars because they're literally probably going to just follow the story, and maybe the only time it actually differs from the vanilla franchise of Star Wars is maybe towards the end of the game, where you actually have a choice of either having the Empire succeed or the Republic succeed, or maybe they'll have another faction too, you know, and then maybe your faction. So maybe they'll have some sort of things. Like, I forgot to mention Baldur's Gate 3. You know, I don't know if it's gonna be better than Baldur's Gate 3, but it'll be something. And for most of the RTS games today, they don't ask like how fast you can command the chaos through battle. The turn-based tactics ask how carefully you can command disaster. So hopefully Star Wars games will put you in positions like the Jedi attacks or something like that. Excuse me. And the enemies have unique units that you have to utilize different skills and specials to deal with. But I digress. In most strategy games that do it that way, it really limits the gameplay or your unit choice. But I guess if it adds to the story and the progression of the game itself, it'll probably be okay. And as I said about people not having enough time to sit down and play a strategy game, hopefully each battle or encounter in Star Wars Zero Company won't be that long. Let me tell you, most strategy games, especially like Fire Emblem and whatnot, most encounters or quests can take up to an hour. And most of these days, I don't think anybody has an hour to sit down and actually just play a game unless they're having a lot of fun, okay? Like, asking me to sit down for an hour to focus on a quest mission for a single player game and it's not really that fun or rewarding, literally still makes me question like why Electronic Arts even bothered making this game. But we'll see. So now the big question of the Zero Company is, can it actually make the comeback for single unit RTS games, squad based RTS games, and I guess the Star Wars gaming franchise? Which would bring us to our final topic. You know, this was a really quick one, I would say so myself. Honestly, like I mentioned already, and you probably could allude, I don't think that it will be a really great, fantastic, must-get RTS game. Like I said, XCOM is honestly one of the most perfect squad-based RTS games already existed and still the king for quite some time now, in my opinion. Like, unless they have a lot of full customization, like you'll be able to change the name, appearance for every squad unit, which they kind of may have, customizing your weapons, customizing your ship and all that. I don't think the game literally stands a chance at dethroning XCOM 2. XCOM 2 is just so freaking good. So like the only reason why you would probably get this game, like I already said, is because you're interested in the Star Wars lore and the story itself, and probably lightsabers. That's pretty much it. I do think that the game might also have permadeath, so you could probably have fun with that. You know, if it's like a little challenge. You know, being able to sit in a match and you just die. It's always a challenge, spending hours and hours. But when it comes to every other squad-based RTS, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not that great. So hopefully Zero Company doesn't try to be the next XCOM. Hopefully it creates its own identity using the Star Wars franchise. And let's hope that it adds more story to the Star Wars universe and just making it its own thing instead of being a generic, bare bones, unit-based, turn-based strategy game. I guess that's pretty much it for this video. I will see you in the next one. All right. And I'm still playing Power World, but I'm probably gonna be done playing Power World soon. There's not much to do. All right. So one last question I'd like to leave you all with is, what do you think, or which franchise do you think that hasn't have an RTS game would make for a good RTS game? Leave a comment. It can be an anime, a movie, a show, a novel, anything, a manga. What do you think would make for a good RTS style game? You know, let me know in the comments section below. That's it for today's Walk Talk Rock show episode, and I'll see you in the next one.